You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. I hope you're having a great day. We're actually recording this episode the week of Thanksgiving, so I know it's going to show at a much later date, but I confess Thanksgiving and the holiday spirit's kind of on my mind. But that aside, I'm excited today to bring a new guest to you that is a gentleman that you may not know him individually, but you're going to know some of the name dropping we're going to do about other brands. His name is John Hewitt. He's a lifelong entrepreneur and visionary, and I'm excited to get him on the show. John, welcome.
Doug, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So would you mind, John, if you can encapsulate your 50 plus years of amazing journey in the business world, both as a visionary, a founder, and someone who's been very successful in building several different brands. Could you just hit the high points and explain to everybody your journey?
Sure. I think I can do it in under 4 minutes. My 55 years. I was at the University of Buffalo. I took an H&R Block course. I loved it. 12 years later, I was running 250 H&R Block locations. My dad was CFO of a public company, and he liked the little Apple he bought by mail better than the mainframe that was running his public company. And he decided we should computerize taxes. So in 1981, we both quit our jobs and built the first tax software for an Apple computer. No one wanted it, way ahead of its time. Got blessed and found a company in Virginia Beach called Mel Jackson Tax Service. Mel had died. We bought 6 offices from his widow. We merged the 2 companies, changed the name to Jackson Hewitt, went public, and sold it 15 years later for $483 million. I had a 3-year non-compete, but my non-compete didn't cover Canada because Jackson Hewitt had never gone to Canada. Having grown up in Buffalo, I knew Canadian taxes. I did Canadian tax returns. So we actually opened Liberty Tax in Canada. And within 3 years became, just as I had in the US, a top 100 retail chain. In 2000, when my non-compete ended, came back to the United States. Now I had to compete against myself, my own name, my own software, my own system, my own people. And yet, not only did we grow faster than Jackson Hewitt, we grew faster than them and H&R Block combined. We opened 4,000 offices in 12 years. My second public company, my second top 100 retail chain, and again, worth $500 million. Again, I sold my stock. And now today we have an umbrella of franchisors. We have 8 different companies focused in 3 areas. One, tax and accounting, which I've been doing for 55 years. And led by our fastest growing in the industry, ATAX. Secondly is our newest, which is construction, led by our roofing, solar, siding division. And then the most exciting, I've learned over the last 3 years, is our pet division. And people are going crazy over their pets. And there's a new humanization of pets. And so our fastest growing brand is a mobile pet grooming called Grooming.
And you told me as we were in the green room, Grooming has achieved a new milestone. What was that accolade you just got?
I'm so excited. I've been competing with H&R Block for 42 years, trying to be number one, and I never got there. I did form a billion-dollar company and a $500 million company, but never got to number one. But already in 39 months, we've become the largest mobile grooming company in the United States.
That's great. And all of that is done on a franchising model. Is that right?
I love franchising, exactly right. And, the beauty of franchise, people don't usually describe it this way because it sounds selfish. But Doug, when people acquire my franchise, they pay me to work for me. Instead of me going out and looking for people that I hope act like owners, I get people that act like owners that pay me to work for me. And so they're harder working, they're more aggressive, more assertive, more competitive, and they do a better job. And it's a pleasure to work with entrepreneurs in competing with corporate employees of other organizations.
Yeah. And, potentially for someone on the outside looking in, franchising is very daunting, and maybe they've heard very negative things about it. But if you look at the basic premise of what franchising is all about, if you want to own a business, you get a playbook, you get systems, you get process, you get a proven formula for creating wealth, creating revenue. It's a great jumpstart into profitability rather than bear the burden of bringing up a new idea fresh out of the ground and trying to do it all the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, I did an hour webinar about last month on the 30 reasons you should be a franchisee versus a mom and pop. But one big picture thing to think of is that after 5 years, 95% of non-franchises fail. So if you start a business without being a franchise, 95% fail in 5 years. 95% of franchisees succeed after 5 years. So it's almost 20-1 advantage being a franchisee versus being a mom and pop.
Yeah. Well, John, let me ask you, in your journey as you built these platforms and enterprises, do you have like maybe a handful of key elements, maybe values or principles that you either learned or operated with as you move forward?
They say people that are the most successful have made the most mistakes. And I made virtually any mistake you can think of. And when my franchisees can't invent something that I haven't screwed up at or seen screwed up. So, Doug, there's no school in the United States on how to be a CEO. And I've taken that school for 42 years now. I call it the School of Hard Knocks. And so I have learned so much over the years and changed so much and improved so much. But yeah, we have in addition to that, I have hundreds and hundreds of lessons. I have the top, I love top 10 lists. So, and I go back to the Bible, and God gave us his top 10, right? The 10 commandments. And so in every one of my businesses and in my business practices, we have our 10 principles. And these are the most important things. And so we give guidance, and it's different industry by industry. Now, there are principles, the top 10 behaviors or competitive advantages are different in each industry, but our principles are the same, right? And one of our principles is principles trump policy. And for example, let's say you had a policy that we had the policy one time back at Jackson Hewitt, where the franchisees could only call a county from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. And one of my low-level accountants got a call at 4:15 and said, "Oops, it's past 4 o'clock. I can't talk to you," and hung up the phone on a franchise. So it violated the principle, which is happy, successful franchisees. That's a principle. And when there's a principle and policy come into conflict, you always adhere to the principle and throw out the policy.
Well, I love that. And, I come from a banking background, and if there's an industry that's fraught with policy, banking is, and it's only gotten worse over the years. But to be able to, drive and operate with a set of core principles, and it's only when you discover a policy violates that you do something different. That's pretty profound. And I'm sitting here just on the fly trying to imagine a couple of the policies we had.
I give you one that happens at my bank all the time. I go to the bank, I go to the drive-through, I put in a check, And even though it's the same person, they asked me to put in my license with the check. And it's the same, and they recognize me. When I come in, they say, "Hi, Mr. Hewitt." And I go to the same bank every week or two and get cash. And why do I have to be bothered to go into my license or into my wallet, get on my license because of some silly policy?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great example, and it is a nuisance. And I'm reminded of a story a friend of mine told me that he was calling a customer service hotline and had a problem with whatever product or service he was operating with. I don't remember. It might have been his cable service or phone. I don't remember. But he said the tech said to him, "Here's what you're going to have to do, blah, blah, blah." And my friend said, "I'm not going to do anything. This is your system, your equipment. It's not working. You're going to have to tell me how you're going to fix it." And a lot of that is perhaps culture oriented. You could argue that somewhere in the training, that's what that representative was told to communicate, and putting all the burden back on the customer, which,
I have to say, Doug, that over my last 60 years, the service in the United States has gotten worse and worse every year.
Yeah.
The policies have gotten more and more silly and restrictive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, myself coming from banking and inside banking, spent a lot of years around the mortgage industry, and boy, the mortgage game has gotten so overwhelmed with governmental oversight. Arguably, in spirit, it was to protect the poor consumer who didn't understand the significance of that transaction. But boy, some of the policies are just incredibly onerous and a huge burden. And if nothing else, it compounds the understanding. We went from a 2-page disclosure form to a 7-page disclosure form. And what consumer wants to read 7 pages just to tell them that?
Well, in your opinion, what percentage of consumers read those 7 pages?
Oh, it's near zero.
Right.
It's near
what
zero.
Does it make if it's 2 or 7? It's a joke.
Yeah, but it's a regulatory game that must be played. And if you're a lending institution and you don't comply with the availability and issuance of those disclosures, you can get shut down and penalized heavily in the process. So makes it very onerous, but I digress. So tell us a little bit. Let's take Zoom and Grooming with the great success is there. Give us a kind of an encapsulated version of how did that start? What were some of the key decisions early on that got it going the way it is now?
Well, when we decide whether a company can be franchised or not, first of all, we look, is there a successful model? So, and there was a successful model. There were people that were doing mobile grooming and very successful. And then secondly, is it replicable? And that can you take a person they're not a PhD, they're not a Einstein, they're not incredibly experienced. Can you take a kind of a normal person that's not experienced, brilliant, or educated and have them run the system? And that was, yes, you can. I mean, the groomers need little education, right? Little, they can go to a 6-month class and be an expert, pretty much an expert in groom. And then is their demand? Well, everywhere in the country we called and said, how long will it take to get my pet groomed? Everywhere. It was 3 weeks plus. So there's this pent up demand. So those were the characteristics. They fit all of our criteria. Right? It was successful. It was replicable. And there was a demand. And even better, the demand is growing. people over the amount of money people spending in pets has doubled over the last 4 years, and expected to double again over the next 4 or 5 years. There's a change in America, and I call it the humanization of pets, that back 10, 20, 30 years ago didn't exist. But now, or it was rare, much more rare. Now, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds are having pets instead of children. And the people that have both like their pet better than their children. So with the rebellion of the young, especially over the last couple of decades, it's a whole new world, and it's a world of pets, and there is no love like the love of a dog, the unconditional love of a dog.
Yeah. Well, I've got a client who actually built, as an entrepreneur, built a very successful pet insurance business, and ultimately sold that to one of the big national carriers for, it wasn't a huge transaction at the time. I think it was about 50 or 70 million, something like that. But what entrepreneur starts something up and wouldn't be happy with that payday,
Yeah,
So,
that's pretty huge for 99.9% of the people.
yeah. Yeah. So great opportunity there. But I like what you said. So a couple of defined principles, again, that are sort of standards or tests for viability and go forward with that. I think that's a great meaning and message. When I'm bouncing around here a little bit, but when I think about, so when someone comes off the street, so to say, and says, "Gee, John, I'm interested in one of your franchises. What can you tell me?" Where do you start that discussion with those folks?
Well, first of all, they're almost always focused on one area. They come in because they're interested in being a tax preparer, or being a roofer, or being a pet, working with pets. So they're almost always industry focused. But we take them through a few steps, because again, I brought in 5,300 franchisees, so I've seen thousands become millionaires, and I've seen 1,000 go out of business. So I have some expertise in knowing which is going to be which. And so we take them through a few steps. Number one is, should they be an entrepreneur? 2/3 of Americans want to be an entrepreneur, but only about half of them can be an entrepreneur. They don't have the self-starting or risk-taking, or it's the wrong time in their lives. They just don't have the capability. They can't manage people. They can't delegate. They can't market. Heaven forbid I ever market, right? Ever tell anyone what I do. And so, first of all, can they be an entrepreneur? If they already have been an entrepreneur, well, that's easy. Okay, check the box. Second is, what industry should they be in? And my philosophy is, find something you love to do, work hard, persevere. So find something you enjoy. And so once we get the industry, then we take them through, okay, what's the right vehicle? If you join this industry, is it with one of our competitors? Is it do it yourself? Or is it with us? And then finally, is it the right time? Because stuff happens. I mean, it's, do I have enough money? Do I have enough spare time? Do I have the approval of my spouse, is anyone, I have to go take care of my sick parents, or I'm sick, or so is it the right time? So it's those basic steps. It's entrepreneur, industry, are we the right fit company-wise, and is this the right timing?
Yeah. Yeah. All of those are critical questions. And I've got to say, I'm right there with you on the idea, because in my own coaching and advisory work, I talk with a lot of people that are coming out of corporate and they want to be entrepreneurs, or they think they want to be entrepreneurs. But I've even developed a little survey type test to get the discussion started, looking at some attributes of entrepreneurship. And as you said, there are definitely some key elements that are much higher indicators of entrepreneurial success. And if you're not wired that way, you're probably going to be very frustrated by it. I know one gentleman now that I'm trying to work with. He went through the gauntlet, found a business to buy, left a corporate job to do so, and quickly discovered he didn't have the psychological demeanor to deal with the day-to-day drama that can happen in a privately held business. I mean, you're right on the front line. You mentioned not being able to manage people. Well, you're right on the front line. And again, if you're in a business that is maybe a little more trade oriented, you've got a different education level, you've got a different social status level. Not that any of that's wrong by any means. These are hardworking people, but they show up with their own attitude about what work should look like. And if you as the owner are not ready to deal with that and meet them where they are, not where you want to be, but where they are, you're going to have a huge challenge.
Absolutely. And that's very dangerous. I'm proud to say that in virtually all of our businesses, you can keep your day job and do this and put your toe in the water to see if it works before you go all in.
That's really an interesting dimension that I think a lot of these folks would love to do, but when you do go all in and actually buy a business, inevitably, at least for the first year, you pretty well have to be there full time if you've taken over from a seller who is exiting the business altogether. And as has been widely reported in the news and business journals, we've got this generational thing going on with the boomers like you and I that are trying to exit businesses. And there's a lot of opportunity out there for the right buyer that could come in and take over an already very healthy cash flowing business. But again, it takes a lot of, I call it psycho-emotional credence. It's not just the technical ability to know how to run a financial report, but you've got to have a lot more in the game to be successful at that.
Absolutely. And as you said, it's a graying economy that 10,000 people a day still are turning 65, and more than 10% of them own businesses. So right. They're first out.
Yeah. There's a lot of that going on. So speaking of which, you do have a business brokerage in your portfolio. Tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Yeah, I love that industry because it's one reason is, it's fun. You get to go in and evaluate businesses and help people, and a third of the people that we help sell didn't even know they had anything to sell. They would have closed it down. So you're really changing lives. And there's not a lot of expertise in our society on how to evaluate a business and what to look for in buying and selling a business. In this country, there are tens of millions of people that are realtors that buy and sell houses. But there's only 4,000 business broker offices in the whole country, and there's 35 million businesses. So it's not a widely known, or it's not very competitive. There's not a lot of competitors out there versus if you're trying to buy and sell residential homes.
Yeah. And, there is a phenomenon there, and similar to the realtor game, even among those 4,000 business brokers, you got the same distribution, kind of that bell curve. You've got a small percentage of brokers that are really dynamic, really helpful to the transaction, as opposed to the guy that hung out a shingle and maybe just wanting to cash a commission check. Because to your point, there's so much on the seller's side to help educate sellers that they may well, if they've been living their life on the success of the business, there's something there to be sold. And it's a matter of packaging that properly, identifying the value proposition that it represents, and getting it out in the market so that it can be promoted and advertised as available. And I agree with you. I've got a colleague that does a lot of the seller side valuation and planning stuff. And there's a huge, I'm drawing a blank. He quotes some numbers about how many owners are unaware of that opportunity, or even how to start thinking about valuing their business to possibly consider a sale.
Yeah, our research shows about a third of the people that we bring on to sell for didn't think they had anything to sell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Speaking of that, just for those who might be listening on this note, if you have a team doing work and you are not the one guy in the truck going out doing the service, you probably have something that can be sold. If you have in fact built up the business where it's not just you doing the work. I frequently tell the story. I have a good friend who is a lifelong veterinarian, talking about pets. He had a one-man practice. He had an office manager. He had a couple of lab techs with him. But when he really wanted to retire, he tried selling the business. But the quick response he got from everybody was, well, if you go, the business goes. There's nothing here tangible that we can put a value on.
When we sell businesses like dentists, doctors, chiropractors, things like that, it's certainly more difficult because it's limited to people in that field, right? You have to find a doctor to sell to a doctor, a dentist to sell to a dentist, but we've been very successful in those situations. So they can be sold. It's just a question of right timing and planning in advance. The problem with succession planning is no one does it, and so now you have some health issue, and you have to sell your business within 3 months. Well, that doesn't give you enough time. If you properly prepare, if you are thinking about it 5 years in advance, you can always bring in an assistant and with the opportunity, that person's going to take over the practice. So you can intern your future owner. So as long as you're thoughtful and plan ahead, then you can sell them, even professional practices like that, 95% of the time.
Right.
But time destroys deals, and it's once the practice stops, then it begins to implode, and you don't have any. 6 months later, you have almost nothing to sell. Your customers have gone elsewhere.
Right. And so, the key point in that, I agree with you. It's that whole idea of succession planning. And if you don't have a generational handoff to do, which is the way a lot of these private businesses go, mom or dad has started the business and they hand it to first line, children. But a lot of those now, in particularly the children have lived with the business their whole lives, and they don't want to take it on. So they want to do something else. And that puts the founder owner in a jam to try to do some planning and thinking about what could happen. And I think, to your point, some prior planning that could have a 3 to 5 year horizon on it. It can do a couple of things. If you get some professional help to value where you are in the business, there might be 2 or 3 very fundamental things that could be adjusted to make the business more profitable. But you have to show proof of that over a couple of years of earnings trends and tax returns to be able to prove up that value for a potential buyer. But if you
The
do,
proof is in the pudding.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The proof is in the pudding.
Right.
You have to show. I mean, talk is real cheap. That you've been in business for 20 years, and you just need to change this. And everyone tells me that when I go to buy a business, everyone says, "Well, if you just make these changes, it should be so much more profitable. You're going to make more money by just making these changes that the owner didn't want to make." That's so common in these transactions.
Right. Well, John, I think we're about up on time for this episode. Thank you so much for sitting in. Tell folks the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in knowing more.
I'm easy. It's loyaltybrands.com. Just reach out, and there's all kinds of links. You can get a copy. Your listeners and your viewers can get a copy of my free book or my book for free. There's a link to that, but it's on loyaltybrands.com.
Great. Well, again, John, thank you so much for sitting in, and congratulations on all your great success. And sounds like you've got a lot of neat things still going on. So appreciate it. Well,
My pleasure.
Folks, we are going to wrap this up. Thank you for sitting in and joining us. I do like to remind you, we've got a video version of this show over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. For now, we're going to sign off, say goodbye, go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.